recording now, this live session will be recorded, and then I will post it in the announcement section. So if there's anything, if there's ever a time where you miss the class, you can come back to the announcements and watch the recording, which is expected, because there will be things that I will state in the recording that I don't say anywhere else. And so if you don't watch it, you're going to miss things. And some people don't care. But, you know, hints, topics, things are going to be on the exam. Those kind of things will be discussed as we move through topics. So make sure you're checking the announcements. I highly recommend that under account, you change your notifications so that you get alerts or emails when somebody posts an announcement, because I tend to think that my announcements are meaningful, but I could be crazy. So hopefully you watched the videos. Did the three of you that are here, did you guys watch the intro videos? Yes, no, maybe. Madison said yes. Good, thank you. If you watch the intro videos, most of this is probably already done. And if all three of you watch the intro videos, we can move a little bit quicker, because I tailor this live session to the people who are here. So if, so Logan, did you watch the intro videos? In the chat box, you can either type or you can verbalize. Say it again. Yeah. Yes, excellent. Thank you. Yeah. Okay, so then you guys know where to go, so I don't need to review most of that, which is fantastic. The one thing, WebWork, are you all in WebWork? Have you all logged in? This is another yes/no question. We also have yes to both, thank you. There's a spot where also you can raise your hand. We can also use that as our yes/no type of a feature too. We had the thing we used to use for 123 online. It had a green check and a red X, so you can do yes/no questions very easily. This doesn't have a great feature with that. But anyway, if you haven't played around in this, I'm not going to go into it since you guys have watched the videos, but make sure that you get into WebWork soon. Your first assignment is due next Monday. And, you know, if you have issues with that, you need to have time to send me emails to say I'm lost, which is going to happen. WebWork is not perfect. There are a lot of issues with it. It's better than nothing. I like the instant feedback, and I like that you get a lot of practice. So there are some pros to it, but there's definitely cons as well. So as you're working through that homework in WebWork, if you have issues, please make sure you get those to me as quickly as possible. One thing that I want to talk about with WebWork, since that is where a lot of your homework is done, unless it's not going to load in that case, I'll forget it. Make sure you submit your answers. If you don't hit the submit button, yeah, it's not going to load. If you're not going to hit the submit button, it's not going to keep track. So no matter how great you do, it doesn't track. So this class is built with modules. If you follow the modules, you won't miss anything. So you'll notice that in this week, we have 4 things that are due. Your WebWork orientation, which is actually not part of your, it's not for a grade, but your WebWork section 2 is for a grade, quiz 1, and discussion board. So everything in here, it's a great way to make sure you can check off and you have everything done. When we get to module 2, you have 3 WebWork sections, a quiz, and a discussion board. You know, module 3, so week 3 is where we get our first Excel assignment. So use the modules to kind of keep track of what you need to do. I know a lot of people don't want to go into the modules, but it's really organized well because I did it. And then you're going to have everything, right? So then you know where everything is, and there's no excuse to miss assignments. If you ever have questions, you just need to, you know, email me and let me know. Also, we will, as we go through every week when we do our PowerPoint, I will tell you what to do that week. So if you're actually coming to the live session, you will also get a reminder that way. Your proctored exams, right? We have 3 exams in this course, one for each unit. You will have to go to an Ivy Tech location for those. If you can't go to Ivy Tech for whatever reason, maybe you live closer to IU or whatever. If you need to go somewhere else, shoot me an email, because we need to have a big conversation. There's all kinds of information that I need in order for you to take the exam somewhere else. If you're taking it at an Ivy Tech, and it doesn't matter which one, there are no issues and we're fine. It'll be great. So, Jamie, can you mute yourself?
Yes.
Thank you. No problem. And then when you want to talk, just unmute and feel free to talk anytime.
Okay.
Thanks.
I'm glad I got in.
Yes, me too. I'm glad you're here. We will talk more about the proctored exams probably I would say next week, because in the third week you want to be scheduling those so that you can take it in week 4. So that first exam is going to come up on you very, very quickly. Your expectations, I will tell you right now, if you take days off, meaning you don't do some of the assignments, because there are a lot. This class is loaded with a lot of work. If you don't do the work, you will not pass. It's plain and simple. There's a lot of stuff in it, and if you say, "Oh, I just won't do this one. I'll catch up next time," you're going to get yourself in a hole, and it's going to be horrible. So the people who fail this class don't fail because the math is difficult. They fail because they don't complete assignments. And zeros negatively affect your grade very, very quickly. So the expectation that I have of you is that you're actually going to do the stuff that that is set out for you to do in this course. I'm here to help you. I will help you in any way possible. If you have questions, all you have to do is ask. I feel like I'm pretty quick getting back to people with emails. So if you have questions, just shoot me an email and I'll get back to you. If you haven't found the videos yet, you're going to want to, because that is crucial. Have you guys all found the videos? Have anybody started watching videos yet? Yes, no, yes, no.
I watched one of.
Yeah, okay, good. Good. You don't technically have to watch videos before you come to class. People do it all kinds of different ways. In the past, I've had people who, whatever sections we were going to cover in our live session on Wednesday, they watched the videos before Wednesday. So when they came to class, they had an idea of what was going on and they could ask questions. And then I've had people who came to class first. If they understood it by what I said, then they never watched any videos. It totally depends on your learning style and on your math background. If it's been a while since you've taken a math class, you're probably going to need more refresher. You're probably going to need to watch more videos. If you've come out of a math class recently, or you're very strong in a math background, you may not need to watch any videos. That is up to you entirely. You don't get points for watching them, but they definitely help explain the material. So if you ever can't find a video, or you think there needs to be an extra video, just let me know and I'll make some magic happen. All right, so this week we are covering Module 1, which is sections 1 and 2, and you have 3 assignments, as I mentioned. Your orientation for web work is not an assignment for a grade, but if you've never used web work, you might want to kind of poke through that a little bit, just because you've never used this system. And then web work 2. One thing about web work, which I did say in the web work video, so if you've watched that, you've already heard this, but if you get a problem wrong 3 times, right, you've checked it 3 times and it's wrong, a video hint may pop up. So if that hint pops up, there's a video to help you kind of walk through it. And if there is no video and you're still stuck, that's where you need to shoot me an email. I'm constantly making more videos for web work, depending on when I get them to our web work coordinator. Sometimes they make it into the new edition and sometimes they don't. So I can always get you a link to a new video to help you with a homework problem. I think video help is a lot better than an email with a bunch of words describing how to do it. That doesn't help me when it comes to math. So you've got the web work, you have a discussion board. You'll have a discussion board every week, except for exam weeks. And you want to make sure that you do those discussion boards after the live session. So you 4 are all here in our live session today. As soon as we finish, you can go do the discussion board, because the discussion board is oftentimes a reflection on the live session. So if you don't watch it live, but you watched on Thursday afternoon, then you would do your discussion board after you watched on Thursday afternoon. So the discussion board is definitely an after the live session type of a dealio. And then quiz 1, right? Take quiz 1 after you've gone through the homework. You want to make sure you have all the practice in before you do the quiz. Quizzes are weighted higher than homework. Okay, any questions from any of the 4 of you or at this point? Either about Ivy Learn in general, about web work, about requirements of this course. I didn't go through any of the syllabus because you guys said you watched the video, which I think I talked about that a little bit in there. But I can talk more about anything. Otherwise, I just want to jump into the sections for this week. Going once, going twice. Nothing? Okay, so I do have the chat box up. At any point in time, you can put questions in the chat box. At any point in time, you can unmute yourself and speak verbally. Speak verbally, it's kind of whatever. You also, I think you may or may not have, yep, I just gave you all permission to draw. If you look just to the left of the go to training box, you should see, it looks like a yellow highlighter. At least that's what it looks like to me. And if you click on that, you have different options. So you can draw with a pen, change colors, and we can draw. This is how I will do all of the math. My handwriting is horrible with this, just so that you're aware. And then we will erase them and move on. But if you have a question or you want to kind of show me, I thought it was this way, you have the ability to take the pen and write. So yeah, I don't think you can write if I'm writing. So if you want to write, you just have to say, hey, give me, let me write. And I will totally let you do that. All right, so if you guys don't appear to have any questions, so we will go ahead and move on. All right, so section 1 and 2. Now you have the book that came in the mail, which is a workbook, right? There's a lot of empty spaces in there. I don't do anything in this live session that comes from the packet because you have videos for that. There's no point in me doing the same problems that you're watching on a video, right? That's really, really not good for you. So what we're going to do, I call them Becky specials. So we will kind of talk about key concepts. I make up my own problems, and they're extra. So it's extra practice, which is why it won't hurt if you watch the videos before you come, because there will be no duplication. Concept duplication, but no problem duplication. So first things first, section 1 is kind of an intro section. There is no homework that goes with this, but it's good for discussion. So first things first, what is quantitative reasoning? Right? I say you got to get back on the math horse, because some of you probably haven't taken math in a while. But any idea how would you describe quantitative reasoning? Right? There's the Q part of this and there's the R part of this. There's 2 words and they have 2 meanings. Let's start with the word quantitative. What does that word mean? You can either type them or you can chat them. Quantitative. This is what we're looking at. There's only 4 of you, so you're going to have to, say something. And you can be wrong. It's all good. I don't mind. Quantitative has the word quantity in it. What does quantity mean? Amount. Excellent. What else? What other kind of words are coming to mind? Madison is the only one who knows what quantity means or has an idea. Nobody else. Man, this is going to be a long semester. I'll tell you that already. If all you're going to do is sit there and listen to me, you guys are going to be super boring. All right, so we'll go with this. Amount. I'm just going to find a synonym to amount. I'm going to say numbers, because it's kind of the same thing, right? But quantitative or quantity means numbers. You have an amount. Thank you, Madison. So far, you're my favorite student because you're the only one participating. All right. And then we get to the word reasoning. When I say reasoning, what word comes? Let's say word association. What does reasoning mean? Logic. Thank you, Logan. Yeah. Reasoning and logic often go together. What else? There's like 5,000 answers we could have for this one. I'll settle for like, I don't know, 3. And if you have a book, you always could just look it up in the book. The words are in there. I tend to like follow the book a little bit in terms of concepts, what we're going to do. All right, so reasoning can mean logic. It can also just straight up mean thinking, right? If you're going to reason through something, you're going to think through it. So thinking, talking. Sometimes when we can talk through things. Understanding, there we go. I think that's in the book, isn't it? High five. Okay, so we've got these items here, the thinking, the understanding, the logic, the talking. So when you put these together, quantitative reasoning, really we're going to talk, we're going to think, we're going to understand, we're going to use logic to talk about numbers. All of those things are true. So in a normal math class that you're probably familiar with back in the day, you would do a bunch of math and you'd circle your number at the end and then you would move on. Well, in this class, we do that a little bit, but then we will write like with sentences and stuff about that number. So what does it mean? How does it relate to what we've done before? Why does it matter? So gone are the days of just rote memorization of how to do processes. Now you have to actually understand what the math means and why it's useful, which it can be good and it can be bad, and some people hate it and some people love it. So it really will depend on the problem, probably. All right, so that's the first half of this section, is just understanding what it is we're doing in this class. And then we get to the next page. Oh, I gotta erase that. There are some graphs in, this is really gonna just piss me off if I can't, I'm gonna have to figure out how to do this. I want this to show up on the screen. Ah! Okay, so different types of graphs. What are the different types of graphs that you can use in the world? I just want you guys to think of graphs. We're not going to do much with them today, but I think it's important that we're going to play with graphs a lot in this class. And if we can't, and we don't know any types of graphs, this will be harder. Oh, there's a pie graph. Great. Pie graph is one. What else? Pie graph is also called a circle graph. There's a bar graph. There's a line graph. Ooh, this is fun. We have a couple of different types of bar graphs. There's bar graphs, there's Pareto charts, there's histograms. These are all types of bar graphs. And we will get to a section. Section 13 talks about bar graphs and the difference between a bar graph and a histogram. We briefly talk about Pareto's. Pie charts we will talk about way before that. And we do talk about line graphs as well. All right, so if you look through section 1 in your book, there are a bunch of graphs in there, and it's real great and it's real fun. Hey, good job naming those. That's all we're going to do with that. Just making sure that, your brains are working. There's section 1, right? Section 2, we get into ratios, and hopefully this will be a review. At some point in your life, you've talked about ratios, and we just want to make sure it's all coming back to you. All right, so ratios. When I say ratios and you think about writing a ratio, what are some different ways we can write ratios? Okay, let's get numbers. That way we don't have to use number signs. Let's use 3 and 7. Okay, so you used a colon. 3, colon, 7. Let's stick with 3 and 7. How else can we write it besides with a colon? Fraction. There's more than 2 ways. This is also in your packet in case you have forgotten. There are 3 common ways of writing ratios. You've gotten 2 of the 3. What's the third way? The third way is my least favorite, so I'm glad that that's the one that you guys haven't shown up yet. Ooh, somebody's typing. It's harder than it looks, isn't it? Yeah. Okay, now I have to ask, who did it? Who wrote? I mean, I'm very proud of you. I just want
Jamie.
Jamie, good job. Way to use the marker. Yeah, the third way is to use the word to in between. So these are the 3 common ways. Now, for our purposes, we are going to generally use the fraction method, at least initially, right? Most ratios are easiest to write as a fraction. And then we will change that fraction. Look at that, fractions. We will change that fraction to a decimal. So let's refresh. How do we change a fraction to a decimal? What is the process? You guys know I have a set number of slides, and once we get through them, we're done, right? So if you communicate, it goes faster. Just throwing that out there. Okay, divide the top by the bottom. Yes, thank you, Alexa. So if I take 3 divided by 7, I end up with 0.429. I'm going to go ahead and round to 3 decimal places. So we can write our ratio also as a decimal. And we will do this a lot. But one thing about decimals is that you can also make them a fraction by putting them over 1. So it just changes it to a smaller fraction, if you will, because now instead of having 3 over 7, I've got 0.429 over 1. It makes the numbers within the ratio smaller. We can also then change that, that decimal to a percent. How do I change a decimal to a percent? Do you remember? Might have been a while. Multiply by 100, exactly. Or in the same thing, right, move the decimal 2 places. So this is the same as 42.9%. All right, so those are kind of the most common ways we are going to play with ratios, fraction, decimal, percent, depending on the problem, right? Now, if it does just straight up ask you for a ratio and you use one of these other two methods, there's nothing wrong with that. Those are totally 100% acceptable ratios. They're just not as easy to play with, so we don't use them as often. All right, let's go ahead and erase that. You need to interrupt me at any point in time if you have a question, okay? So I want you guys to practice this one. So I want you to write the ratio 16 to 24 as a fraction, as a decimal, and then as a percent. So I'll give you about a minute and a half or so. All right, Logan is ready. So he starts and says the fraction is 2/3, which I appreciate because you reduced, right? It starts as 16 over 24, but they are both reducible by 8, which gives us 2/3. That is correct. What does that become as a decimal? And you're going to have to round because you don't have much of a choice. 0.667. Beautiful. And good rounding, which I appreciate. And then as a percent. Excellent. 66.7%. So just move it 2 places to the right. Great. There's basic, not a whole lot to that, but that's kind of the basics behind it. Now let's get into a little more of the, what's the word I'm looking for? The process. Okay, so now we're going to do a little bit of a difference between part to part and part to whole. And I should have left myself a little bit of room on this because there is a very big difference in how you can write about fractions part to whole. So basic difference, a part to part fraction you can write as a decimal, and part to whole you can write as a percent. And the reason, if you think about percent means out of 100, right? So if I'm talking about, if I have a pie graph and we break it up into a bunch of different things, all together this whole thing is 100%. So the whole implies 100%. The part is whatever else. And that's why we can write it as a percent. If you're just part to part, you don't have anything that represents the whole piece, if that logically makes sense in your head. So when we're looking at these, all right, I want you to try the the 4 things that I have circled. We're going to write meaningful sentences together, but I want you to try to write ratios and then decide if they're part to part or part to whole. If they're part to part, write it as a decimal. If they're part to part, write it as a percent. part to whole write as a percent. Try that, and we'll go 2 or 3 minutes. Wish there was a way for me to ask you guys if you were done and you to give a symbol instead of just, guessing. I don't know. It's really not a way. But all right, let's go ahead and start chatting. I'm going to change my pen color. And let's start with the ratio of males to the whole class. So if we're talking about a reduced fraction, males to the whole class, what do we got? 3/5. Excellent. Is this part to part or part to whole? Part to whole. How do we know? It's kind of it's almost like well, Becky, you're an idiot when you ask that question, right? Because it says, you're comparing to the whole class. And sometimes when I'm doing these problems and I see the word ratio makes me think fraction. And then I see of males. Well, males comes first, so males has to be on top. And then it says to the whole class. So I got the whole class on the bottom. And I look at the denominator. And if it says whole or total or all or anything that implies everybody, then I know I have a part to whole ratio. And if it's part to whole, that means I can write this as a percent. So how do I write 3/5 as a percent? It's 60%, exactly, because 3/5 is 0.6. Move it 2 places, and we end up with 60%. All right. So when we talk about having a meaningful sentence, I think the part to whole ratios are a whole lot easier to write meaningful sentences. It's just me. Because we could say, okay, we have 60%. So 60% of the class is male. Right? Because the whole is the whole class. So 60% of the class is, and then males is what we're talking about, so it's male. When we talk about meaningful sentences, what we're really talking about is if you walked up to somebody and you gave them a meaningful sentence, they'd be able to say, oh, that's interesting information, or that's not interesting information, but it's still information. They won't go, what? I mean, if you just walked up to somebody and said 60%, they would look at you like, what are you talking about, right? You've got to have more information. So you've got to make sure when you're writing these meaningful sentences that you're actually giving information in them. So the who, what, when, where, how much, where, how often, what year, any information that you can give is important and becomes meaningful, right? So think about if I'm talking to somebody who has no idea what I'm doing, will this make sense to them? That's how you can decide if your meaningful sentence is good or not. All right, let's go down to the letter B. What's the ratio of females to males? Again, let's go reduced fraction. What do we got? 2/3. Fabulous. Stop me if you have questions, but so far so good. is this part to part or part to whole? Part to part, exactly. Part to part because the top is females, the bottom is males. Each one of those groups is a part of the whole population. So because neither one of them is a total, we are a part to part ratio. That means we can only write this as a decimal. What is 2/3 as a decimal? 0.67, I'll take that. Okay, and now we want to write this in a meaningful sentence. A couple different ways you can do it, and you can use either ratio, right? The 2/3 or the 0.67. If I do the 2/3, right, there are 2 females to every 3 males, right? So that's a meaningful sentence using the 2/3 ratio. Now I'm going to change colors. When I go to the 0.67, if I put that over 1, we could say there are 0.67 females to each male. And you might say, Becca, that doesn't make any sense. You can't have 0.67 of a female. And while that's true, that's easy to see. It is definitely not a 1-to-1 ratio, right? There are less females than males. And, you know, depending on what you're looking for, that might be good, it might be bad. So either one of those would be an acceptable, meaningful sentence. If you want it to actually make sense, right, the green one works, 2 females to every 3 males. Depends on what you're looking for. Okay, questions on part to part or part to whole ratios? Everything good there? Going once, going twice? All right, one thing about go to training, I don't know if you guys have noticed this. I don't know where it is on yours because my little tablet spot is different as the instructor than as a member. But there's a spot where it says raised hand. So I think you guys can raise your hands. I can only have one thing open at a time. So I have the chat box open. That way I can see what you guys are typing. That's why I can respond to that. But if I have the chat box open, I can't see anything else. So if you have a question, if you raise your hand, it dings on my end. So I'll know that you have a question and you can interrupt, right? So that's kind of a way to interrupt without chatting or without just using your words. You can raise your hand and ding. Just a little side note. Okay, so let's erase all of that crap. Let's move to the next part. The last part of section 2 is age dependency ratios. So this is like a real life application of ratios, and they're kind of interesting, and whether you like them or not is really not important. The important part is they will be on the first exam, so as an application of ratios. So it's not something that you can just say, I don't want to do this, because it will hurt you in terms of your grade if you choose to just ignore this part. So with that being said, see, that's where I say you get special information by actually watching the live session, because I tell you things like that. Okay, so age dependency ratios, basically what this means, we have 3 age groups in this country by definition. I don't know who made it up, but somebody did. So the under 15 age group, the 0 to 14-year-olds are considered the children. Once you hit 15, you are part of the working class. So 15 to 64 are the workers. And then I'm going to put this over here, 65 and older, we consider the oldies. All right, so when we're talking about dependency, when you are a child, you depend on your parents or your guardians, grandparents, whoever, to provide for you. If you are a parent, you provide for your children. And this is kind of a concept in terms of the economy. So we compare our dependents, our children, and our old people, because we assume that old people and our children are not working. We say they depend on the working class in terms of the economy. All right, so we want a low dependency ratio, because if we have a low dependency ratio, that means there's more free money in the economy to buy things, right? And if there's more money circulating in the economy, then things just are better, right? This is kind of a general economics type of a dealio. And I'm not going to get too much into it because I don't know that much about it. So the thing is, we have child dependency where we're only looking at the children as dependents, We have old age dependency where we're only looking at the old people. And then we have age dependency when we're looking at all of the dependents together. And these are three different ratios. Okay, so child dependency, I'm going to use age groups. Child dependency uses the children compared to the working class. Okay, so we're going to do an example of this in a minute, but this is how we get to the ratio. Child dependency is the children compared to the working class. You're going to get a decimal answer, right? Is this part to part or part to whole? Child dependency, children compared to workers, part to part to whole. Madison says part to part. I agree, right? Because we're not comparing to the total population, we're comparing to the workers, and they are, again, part of the population. Okay, then we get to old age dependency. Old age, if you think logically, well, that's the old people, 16 and above, 65 and above, compared to the working class, which is 15 to 64. Again, comparing to the working class, so again, we have a part-to-part ratio. Age dependency, we want all of our dependents. So we want 0 to 14 plus the 65 and older, right? So all of the dependents compared to the workers. Again, we're comparing to another part of the population, so we have a part-to-part. All of these are part-to-part ratios because you are not comparing to the total. Okay? Any questions conceptually about dependency ratios? So far, so good? Great, I'll confuse you on the next slide. All right, so let's erase that, and let's do some examples. I might need more room, but that's okay. All right, so section 2 ratios, find the child dependency ratio. All right, so we have our 3 age groups, and I'm really nice, and I made these small numbers so they're easier to work with in this. But when you get to web work, I think it's question 18, you're going to have a large data set that you're going to have to add up the numbers for the age groups for it, and make sure that you're really looking at that table because details matter. And if you get stuck, that's okay. Shoot me an email, and it'll probably take me 13 seconds to figure out where you missed the detail because I've been teaching this class a long time. I know where people get their hitch of the giddy up. So just let me know if you have issues as you're working through that homework. But okay, we're going to find these 3 ratios. So starting off, we've got child dependency. Don't worry about reducing or anything. What does the child dependency ratio look like as a fraction? All right, so Madison's, where's my pen? So 400 over 850. Perfect. And we do that because 400 is the number of children, 850 is the number of workers, and there's a ratio. We know this is part to part, so we can write this as a decimal. What is this as a decimal? Well, let's just go 2 decimal places to this. So 400 over 850 as a decimal is what? 0.47. Excellent. All right, so we've got 0.47. And now we want to write meaningful sentences. And this is where it can get a little bit tricky. So I want to kind of walk you through this. We know that on the top are children. I just spelled that wrong. There's an L in there. And on the bottom, we have workers. Okay. I think I do this. I can add a text box. Yes. Okay. So a meaningful sentence. There are 0.47 children dependent on every one worker. And if you say right now, that doesn't make any sense because you can't have 0.47 of a child. Well, that's true. Okay, so let me then talk about manipulating fractions. If I have 0.47 over 1, I can move the decimal 1 place to the right, multiply by 10, but I've got to do it to the bottom as well. So that gives me 4.7 over 10. So my meaningful sentence could also be there are 4.7 children dependent on every 10 workers. Stop me if this doesn't make sense. And you can keep going. If you want to say, well, I don't like any decimals, okay, we'll move it one more place. Now I have 47 over 100. So there are 47 children dependent on every 100 workers. And so there's all three of those sentences are equivalent. They all mean the same thing, and they all describe what this means. So if you are part of the working class, you are supporting approximately half of a child based off of this data. Okay. All right. I want you guys to find the old age dependency. Find the ratio as a decimal and write a meaningful sentence. All right. Old age dependency. Let's start as a fraction. What's it look like as a fraction? $220 over 850. Excellent. Okay, so 220 over 850. Change that to a decimal, which gives us 0.26. And so when you're writing your meaningful sentence, basically you swap out these numbers for your 0.26. Instead of children, you have oldies. And there's your difference, right? Swap them out. You can still move your decimal and that kind of thing. All right, any questions about old age dependency ratio? Okay, the last one, the age dependency. I need to block this off, right? This is where we put the two together. So my numerator is going to be the 400 plus 220, and we're going to divide that by 850. So that gives me 620 divided by 850. Change that, and we get 0.73. So when you're talking about that again, change out your number, get rid of this entirely, and just put there are 0.73 dependents on each worker. And there's your meaningful sentence. And that's kind of how dependency ratios roll. Okay, who's got questions? There's not a whole lot of math here in week one. Ratios, that's pretty much it. But ratios are going to be kind of a backbone of everything we do for a while at least. And they're going to come up like a bad penny all semester. So it's going to be really important that you understand how ratios work, how you can maneuver between them, and all that fun business. So any questions on ratios? All right. Well, so for next time, because that's it. I usually plan, just the highlights of the sections. So you want to complete the discussion board, and you can do that as soon as you get out of here if you'd like. You want to make sure you can log into web work, the orientation. By the way, the third answer to number 6 is yes. There's a hitch, and it doesn't show up like it's supposed to. So it's just in the orientation. It's not for a grade, so I give you that. Web work 2 does have some tricky pieces to it, so if you get stuck, shoot me an email. And then don't forget to do quiz 1 as well. We do 3 sections next time, so we kind of fly through them. So it might be good to at least preview them before you come, or definitely come for the highlights. So if you don't have any other questions, that's all I've got. So feel free to log out, go away. I will be posting this recording. Not that you really want to watch it again, but maybe you have a question on something I said, you can always come back and say, I knew it was at the end, fast forward, whatever. But it will be posted under the announcements. So there you go. All right. Thanks for showing up, everybody. And if you have any questions, email me. I'm always available to help. So have a good day, and I will see you next week.